the use of tunnels
beyond coincidence. You ask, why would you fight there? Because NATO and Zog tricked you on Twitter into thinking that the left was something real. But instead, it's just breadtube. And it's just NATO. It's just a bunch of trannies on YouTube convincing you to do things to put yourself on the line for a war that they cannot marshal U.S. troops into effectively enough because Iraq and Afghanistan were a fucking disaster. And everyone knew that by the mid-2010s. Trump campaigned on that. And you know, that may have been what put him over the edge and what got him into the office. Trump wasn't going to send 60,000 troops over there. The neocons weren't in charge anymore. So they recruit stochastically. They do to these guys what they accuse you of doing. Remember when they accused you of being stochastic lone wolf terrorists in waiting? Meanwhile, they're here pimping out the minds of this vast reserve of combat veterans created by neoconservative wars the last 2 decades. Who come home and they can't keep a gun out of their fucking mouth. And they can't keep OxyContin out of their mouth. And they can't keep the Jack bottle out of their mouth.
Hey, come on, get
and so they go and doom scroll Twitter. And they went on the GI Bill when they came back because everybody's got to go to college. You got to make use of it. And over some Khazarian milkers or whatever, they get dragged into DSA. Maybe it's out of some sense of self-pity.
We're staying in.
And there was a direct recruiting drive from DSA people toward the troops. That's what they called them. They called them troops.
It sounded different. It fucking sounded different.
My old road dog and legendary internet operator, and I'll just refer to him by his most famous name because this is what got on a certain Andre Wang Lin's website once. Representative Greg Stover of Nebraska's 93rd district. We used to keep tabs on these people because it was very funny. And I know that Representative Greg Stover, under his retired Priv account name, still does. But we were aware of this, and it paid dividends because a lot of the men who were part of these socialist circles started to burn out on the tranniocracy and the gynocracy over there, and the insanity. Their expectations didn't meet reality because they didn't know what they were getting engaged in was some kind of peel-off.
But by far the most feared
by the liberal establishment to create an American virtue version of the Bernie campaign. And then, of course, the Bernie campaign was a trap as well. So these are Chapo Trap House fans. This is the zeitgeist around 2016, 2017, 2018. You're watching it right now. This is the zeitgeist around permanentizing and continuing the global war on terror by other means. By fake in the creation of voluntarism. By people who either missed the global war on terror but enjoyed its aesthetics. Zog gave them another reason to go and fight on their behalf, this time against Assad. They'd lost all their political capital. They couldn't raise another generation of warriors and bring them into a fight. The political capital and the wherewithal to do that was not there. The Third Front War was not there. That's why we couldn't invade Iran. That's why we didn't properly invade Syria. So instead, they used social media under the guise of the continuation of Occupy Wall Street and under the guise of the continuation of the Bernie campaign through vehicles like democratic socialism. And all these veterans that came back after, 3 years of combat experience, say from, especially in the status of forces agreement era after 2011, there wasn't a lot of action in Iraq and there wasn't a lot of action in Afghanistan. So even if you went over there, you were probably unfulfilled versus being trained by guys who had been there for the salad days of slaughtering insurgents in Iraq during the surge, who were now your trainers and your drill instructors. And they prepared you for something that never came for you. You came back and you went to college and you turned into a person that you, young guys who have gone to college, you see a lot of your weaker male peers get lured into in their first taste of ideology, where they get turned into milquetoast, weak socialists. And only now are they starting, and some of us starting to figure out what was always behind this. It wasn't some authenticity. It was just a means of selection. A means of globalist selection. And what I mean by that is you see the most effective political operators that were raised up out of that Occupy Wall Street and democratic socialist milieu allowed to enter the Biden administration as minor functionaries. But this is where the useless people were sent to fight and die on behalf of Kurdish communists.
Okay, I'm going to send this to the university.
Because Zog couldn't raise troops the normal way. So they fucked their mind up. They create stochastic terrorists. That's why they accuse you of doing it and being it. Now they're doing it again in Ukraine. It's because you can't quite establish a playbook until at least one initial proof of concept. And this was the proof of concept.
Break out! Exploit! Exploit!
You know, when Bookcat and I talk about being old heads on Twitter,
times with my buddies.
this is the kind of stuff that comes to mind.
It wasn't always that way. There were some ups and downs.
This is a period in time that's actually gone. It's long gone. It's over. It's over. And a lot of these types of people have shifted into mold bugs milieu, into the Justin Murphy orbit. I was going to say orbit, but it's actually orbit, right? They have been attracted over to the new right or whatever in this Telian project to peel off those who were disaffected with the reality of what they thought were grassroots leftist organizations
and there's
concentrated in New York City. That's what the Dimes Square art scene is responding to.
None of our parents wanted us to come here. We had to leave jobs, leave school, and we traded the comfort.
And maybe Yarvin and Teal know that
life
if somebody has
in
been
order to
tricked
come
once or
live in
twice or
caves.
3 times before, you can just trick them again.
Have no electricity at times.
Do you remember what Heidi St. John's attack was against Joe
potable water,
Kent? That he was
to learn a new
Portland Joe, the
language and a
Bernie
new
bro.
culture, all in a
He is
time span
emblematic of
about a
this.
year. Not to mention, you have to
Where
work
was Kent's
and
wife
live
killed?
and
In
fight
Syria,
with everybody
working for
that comes here, no
Comtech,
matter who they are,
which is
and
another
what
cover name
reasons
for
brought
the
them here. But I can honestly say,
probably
despite all
low-level
these
voice
hurdles,
intercept or signals,
I, for
close-range
myself,
signals intelligence
was able
wing
to
of the
maintain my
NSA
morale.
via Army's
I'm sure
intelligence
my comrades would say the same
support
about me.
activity, which Kent also worked for. That's where he met his wife at Fort Meade, and for the second time in training there, in language training at Meade, and that's where they decided to get married and have kids. Kent went from being a Bernie guy, remember? He went from being a Bernie guy to being a Teal
The
guy.
international team. Most of the days we
And in
spent
5 or
with the
6 years, there
Kurds,
might be
with the
documentaries
Arabs,
about
the
those
Yazidis.
guys too, although I
We had to
doubt
learn
it.
their culture, the language.
And beyond coincidence, as Glow Kent was probably a DSA. Well, why would you want to experienced singleton operator to go into a political organization where you're trying to draw aimless young men, especially those with lower level combat experience from the global war on terror, over to Syria? Would you send Joe Kent, who himself has said he had a lot of experience working in human intelligence and running agent networks in austere conditions, and then he's heading into politics? Does a tiger change its stripes? What did Trump say about the lady who let the snake in? Or what's that old Russian fable about the scorpion and the frog?
There's actually
It's my nature.
of them that devote their life to the cause. Many of them came to Sinjar from northern Kurdistan, which is located
Wolfie
in Turkey.
has a great comment.
they
It
don't
puzzles
have
me
an
how
option to
so
come
many
back
white
home.
men allow themselves to be
can imagine
subsumed
just
into
how
another
devoted
culture
they
like
are
this.
to the cause.
Yeah? Well, who's
Now,
keeping you
First
from being
Internationals
subsumed into your
placed in
own
a Kurdish
culture
unit,
and promoting your
which meant
own
you had to learn the
culture?
language.
What are they going to direct you toward? They're going to direct you toward their
do the
ends
same
no
work
matter
as
what.
them.
If they're directing you toward being a Destiny tranny, that's fulfilling their cultural
It
ends.
also meant a lot of restrictions.
If they're going
To
to
name just a few of the rules
send guys
that
who can't be
Kurds
Destiny
hold themselves
trannies
to.
who are a little tougher and meaner and
T-shirts in front of
crazier,
a woman.
well, you just you put them out on the front lines by convincing them that this is the only way we can fight for true socialist solidarity, brother, is to go fight on behalf of
shisha, no
Zog
cell phones, no
against
pictures.
Bashar al-Assad. It doesn't matter who for.
Seriously? Yeah. Wallah.
People get
No
wrapped up
relationships,
in trying to
that means
identify
no
the
sex.
principles of these different movements.
last but not
Oh,
least,
how
you
could
can't make
John
money.
McCain support jihadists?
These are
How
some
could
of the rules,
this, that, or
but
the other?
luckily,
And it's like
because of
they're missing the bigger
democratic
picture, that the
they allowed
enemy
us
of
to
their
have our own
enemy
culture as well.
is their friend. They need people to funnel weapons and all this stuff and training. And
And our culture.
does it make
dictates a
sense
lot
to
of
send
shenanigans.
former Marines like this guy over to the weirdo dinguses? I mean, look how these fucking people live. It's a huge upgrade to go and send militarily trained white dudes who proved their mettle in the global war on terror, survived combat there, to go and train these guys how to fight a little bit whiter. So you do it through other means. You do it through typical media sorcery. You do it through the academy. And that's the intersection
One of the more
of two things that you're
interesting
seeing right
things to
here.
do
How do
while
you
we were
trick
there
somebody
was
into
repel
putting
it.
on for another culture?
That was one of the
Well,
only
you
things
send them
that
to
the Kurds let us
college
teach 'em.
and you make sure they're watching Vice News on YouTube. You do what kind of person would that create out of a military veteran who at 21 can barely keep himself from blowing his brains out because of what he saw and did over there? and how he knew it was meaningless and useless. What are they going over there to respond to anyway, at this point, right? The Islamic State. And also, in Syria, more directly, the backlash from the failed trickster neocon machinations from the State Department of the Arab Spring, which was all done through what? Social media. The export of social media to the third world. The export of communications technology that was developed and beta tested against you first.
Some of the more
Syrians weren't and Egyptians weren't using Android phones and 3G networks in 2009 like you were. You were a test run.
2 weeks or so.
Where did that technology come from?
To have an attack.
I don't know. Maybe the military-industrial complex, right? That's inevitably the origins of all this advanced technology. You think that the masters aren't going to use their own tools to their own ends?
International unit in YBS is a man named Bajos.
Your real crime is that you're just smarter than these people. That's why they fucking hate you. You're smart enough to recognize the truth when you hear it.
One of the more severe bombings we had.
And you're curious enough to go out and try and find more information than other people, so you run into people like Nick, and you run into places like Cozy.tv. You run into these communities, and as soon as you hear it, you're smart enough to know that this is more true than what you've been hearing your entire life, and it speaks to you. And you identify your own interests.
20-something-year-old guy.
And that's your crime.
How death happens, and how
when Nick talks about just being a free man thinking or whatever, it's tongue-in-cheek.
Life doesn't stop.
It's not entirely a joke. It's not entirely a maxim. It's also the truth.
Doing our job.
But if you can identify your interests and you're not ethnically part of the regime, you're their fucking problem. And you fight a lot smarter than these idiots do. You know that you don't need a gun and a truck full of food. That guy even looks like Joe Kent. That's crazy. Look at that. This is what being a mercenary for Zog does to a nigga. This guy even had the Joe Kent physiognomy going on. Horrifying. Hello, my fellow Kurds. Hello, my fellow Kurds. It's just spooky. It's spooky. Fuck these people. And through their inattention and their inability to understand what's rising up underneath them, they're fucking themselves. That's the nature of being a reactionary, isn't it? There had to be something to react to. Now, maybe after the total Groyper victory, we'll get a handle on how to never be fooled again. But that's hubristic. We all know. Strong times. Or strong men create good times, create weak men, create bad times, create strong men, so on and so forth. So shout out to the strong men of Cozy.tv. We're all going to make it.